Charanaravinda Bande Gurashi Charanaravinda Bande Gurashi Charanaravinda Mahaprabhu ki Tana Nitya Gita Vaditra Madhyam Manasura Sena Mahaprabhu ki Tana Nitya Gita Romanchakam Pasru Taranga Bhajo Bande Garashi Charanara Vrinda Shri Vigrahara Dana Nityanana Shringara Tanama Diramajanado Dana Nityanana Shringara Tanama Diramajanado Juktasya Bhaktamsa Neyunjatapi Bande Gurashi Charanara Vrindam Chaturvidhashi Bhagavat Prasada Satana Triptan Hari Bhakta Sangam Chaturvidhashi Bhagavat Prasada Satana Triptan Kridvaiva Tripten Bhajata Shadeva Bande Garashi Charanara Vrindam Bhajata Shadeva Bande Garashi Shiradhikama Gabayara Para Madhurya Leela Gunarupanamna Shiradhikama Para Pratikshana Dhanalarupasya Bande Gurashi Charanara Vrindam Bande Gurashi Charanara Nekunja Yuno Ratikeli Siddhai Jayali Virjukti Apekshaniya Nikunjayuna Ratikeri Siddhai Jajali Virjukti Tatrati Daksha Ativalavasya Bande Gurashi Charanara Vrindam Sakchadhari Dena Shamasta Shashri Ruktastathava Gataiva Sadhavi Kintu Praborja Priya Eva Tasya Bande Gurashi Charanara Vrindam Bande Gurashi Yasya Prasada Bhagavat Prasadam Yasya Prasadam Nagati Kutapi Yasya Prasadam Bhagavat Prasadam Yasya Prasadam Nagati Kutapi Jayam stuvam tasya yasatrin sandhyam Vande Gurashi charanara vrindam Vande Gurashi charanara Jayam stuvam tasya yasatrin sandhyam Vande Gurashi charanara vrindam Vande Gurashi Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Nitina Mine Nama Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pristaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Swami Nitina Namaste Sarasvate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunavadi Pachatari Shatarine Namaste Sarasvati Deve Gauravani Nirvishesha Shunavadi Pachata Disata Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Shri Krishna Chaitanya Nityananda Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Shri Krishna Chaitanya Nityananda Gadadhar Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Rama, Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Haribo, Gaura Brahmanandi, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Haribo, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama. Oh, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hariyaraye Namah, Krishna Jadavaye Namah, Jadavaye Madhavaya Keshavaya Namah, Gopal Govinda Ram Shri Madhusudan, Giridhari Gopinath Madana Mohan, Shri Chaitanya Nityananda, Shri Advaita Sita. Hare Guru Vaishnava Bhagavata Gita. Shri Rupa Sanatan Bhattaraguna. Shri Jiva Gopala Bhatta Dasaraguna. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Shri Radha Nila Madhav, Radha Nila Madhav Radhe. Jaya Jagannath, Jaya Baladeva, Jaya Subhadrama, Jaya Sudarshan Chakra. Jaya Sitaram, 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 Jaya Lakshman Hanuman. Netai Gaura Haribo, 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 Netai Gaura Haribo, Haribo, Haribo. Haribo Nitai Gaura Pramanande, Hari Haribo. Jai Vishwapar Paramahansa Prabhu Jakacharya Sutara Saraswati Srimad. His Divine Grace Abhay Charavina Bhakti Vedanta Swami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. ISKCON Pratishta Bhiviti Samstapaka Char Vaishnava Saramani Parita Pavana Srila Prabhupada Ji Maharaj Ki Jai. Shri Gaurya Guru Varga Patiti Udhari Ki Jai. Shri Rupa Sanatana Bhatta Raghunatha Shri Jiva Gopala Bhatta Dasa Gunasat Goswami Prabhu Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ji Ki Jai. Jai Ananta Koti Vaishnavrinda Ki Jai. Prem Se Kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shubhasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. Jai Param Dayal Shri Nityananda Prabhu Ki Jai. Jai Prema Nama Sankirtaneka Janaka Prema Purushottama Shri Sachinandana Shriman Gauranga Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu Gaura Hari Mahavrana Avatar Ki Jai. Golokera Pramadhan Harinam Sankirtan Jaga Ki Jai. Juga Dharma Hare Krishna Mahamantra Ki Jai. Brihat Nidanga Transcendental Book Distribution Seva Ki Jai. Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopagopina Radha Kund Samakunde Giriraj Govardhan Ki Jai. Shri Braja Bhum Vrindavan Mathur Dham Ki Jai. The Lordship Shri Shri Radha Nila Madhava Ki Jai. Shri Shri Maya Punavadip Eka Chakradam Ki Jai. Jai Parama Karuna Shri Shri Gaur Nitai Ki Jai. Shri Purushottama Ketra Jagannath Puri Dham Ki Jai. Shri Shri Jagannath Swami Baladev Prabhu Smasudra Devi Sudarshan Chakra Bhagavan Ki Jai. Bhakti Sarva Vigna Vinashana Kanu Shingare Bhagavan Ki Jai. Jaganga Mai Jamuna Mai Ki Jai. Tulsi Maharani Vrindi Devi Bhakti Devi Ki Jai. Shri Mathura Dharani Ki Jai. Shamavita Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. Nitai Gaurari Pramanande. All glory to the assembled bodies. All glory to the assembled bodies. All glories to the assembled bodies. All glories, all glories, all glories to Shri Shri Guru Shri Gauranga. What do you prefer? What do you want to say? Come on, make a choice.
Nothing. Namaste Narasimhaya.
Namaste Narasimhaya.
Pralada Lada Dahine. Pralada Lada Dahine. Hiranyakashipurakai. Silatangka nakalae.
Silatangka nakalae.
Ito nasimha parato nasimha.
Ito nasimha parato nasimha.
Ito nasimha parato nasimha.
Ito nasimha parato nasimha.
Yato yato yami tato nasimha.
Jato jato jami jato nasimha.
Bahe nasimha vidahe nasimha.
Baye nasimha baye nasimha.
Bahe Narsimha, Hridaye Narsimha.
Baye nasimha baye nasimha.
Narasimha Bhagin Sharanam Tapade.
Narasimha Madhu Sharanam Gopale.
Navrakara Kamala Bare. Nakha Adbhuta Singha. Lalita Hiranyakashipu. Tanu Bringanga Keshavadhita Narari Rupa Jaya Jagadisha Hare Jaya Jagadisha Hare Jaya Jagadisha Hare Tavakara Kamala Pare Nakha Adbhuta Shringam Dalita Hiranyakashipu Ranuvinga Keshavadhita Narari Rupa Jagadisha Hare Jaya Jagadisha Hare Jaya Jagadisha Hare Keshavadhrita Narari Rupa Jaya Jagadisha Hare Jaya Jagadisha Hare Jaya Jagadisha Hare Keshavadhrita Narari Rupa Jaya Jagadisha Hare Jaya Jagadisha Hare Jaya Jagadisha Hare Jaya Narsimha Dev 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 Jaya Narsimha Jaya Prahlad Maharaj Prahlad Maharaj Prahlad Maharaj Jaya Prahlad Maharaj Jaya Prahlad Maharaj Prahlad Maharaj Prahlad Maharaj Jaya Prahlad Maharaj Jaya Jaya Prabhupada 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Jaya Prabhupada 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 Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Jaya Gurudev 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 Jaya Jaya Gurudev Jaya Jaya Gurudev 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 Jaya Jaya Gurudev Shri Nrsimhadev Bhagwan ki प्रहलाद महाराज की श्रील प्रभुपाद की जय
Nitai Gaura Vipramanande. Krishna Bhakti Prade Devi Sattvatai Namo Namaha. Vrindai Tulasi Devai Krishna Bhakti Prade Devi Sattvatai Vrindai Tulasi Devai Priyai Krishnasata Vishnu Bhakti Prade Devi Sattvatai
तुलसी देवाय प्रियाय केशवस्य च विष्णु भक्ति प्रति देवी सत्यवताय नमो नमः।
श्रीमती तुलसी महारानी
की
वृंद देवी की
जय।
जय। Okay, you retired. He's retired. You can sing.
तुलसी कृष्ण प्रेयसी नमो नमः तुलसी कृष्ण थैंक यू नमो नमः राधा कृष्ण सेवा पावो हे अभिलाषी राधा कृष्ण सेवा पावो हे अभिलाषी राधा कृष्ण सेवा पावो हे अभिलाषी
राधा कृष्ण सेवा
তোমার শরণ লো তারা বাঞ্ছ পূর্ণ হয়
তোমার শরণ লো
তারা বাঞ্ছ পূর্ণ টিকা করি করো তারে বৃন্দাবনবাসী
কৃপা করে
विलास कुंज दियोवा नयने रिबो सधा युगल रूप राशि দানাধর সাকিলানুঘাতা করো দানাধর সেবাধিকার দিরে কর নিজ দাসী ক্রিয়াধিকার দিরে কর নিজ দাসী তুমি সেবাধিকার দিরে কর নিজ দাসী সেবাধিকার कृष्ण दास कोई जिनवासी श्री राधा गोविंद प्रेम सदा जिनवासी श्री राधा गोविंद प्रेम सदा जिनवासी श्री राधा गोविंद प्रेम सदा जिनवासी ज्ञानी कानि च पापानि ब्रह्महत्यादिकानि च तानि तानि प्रणश्यन्ति प्रदक्षिणा पदे पदे ब्रह्महत्यादिकानि च तानि तानि प्रणश्यन्ति प्रदक्षिणा पदे पदे यानि कानि च पापानि ब्रह्महत्यादिकानि च तानि तानि प्रणश्यन्ति प्रदक्षिणा पदे पदे Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Jaya Tulsi Maharani 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 Jaya Vrinda Devi Vrinda Devi Vrinda Devi Jaya Vrinda Devi Jaya Vrinda Devi Vrinda Devi Vrinda Devi Jaya Vrinda Devi Tai Gaur Hari Bol Hari Bol Hari Bol Tai Gaur Hari Bol Tai Gaur Hari Bol Hari Bol Hari Bol Hari Bol Jaya Jaya Prabhupada 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Jaya Gurudev 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 Jaya Jaya Gurudev Gurudev
Shri Vrindai Tulasi Bhakti Kesava Satya Krishna Bhakti Radhe Devi Sattvatai Vrindai Tulasi Bhakti Kesava Satya Krishna Bhakti Radhe Devi Sattvatai Vrindaye Tulasi Devaya Priyaye Kesava Satya Krishna Bhakti Pravidevi Sattvatai Shrimati Tulasi Maharani Vrindadevi ki jai. Oh Tulsi, beloved Krishna, I bow before you again and again. My desire is to obtain the service of Shri Radha and Krishna. Whoever takes shelter with his wishes fulfilled, bestow your mercy upon him, you make him resident of Vrindavan. My desire is that you also grant me a residence in pleasure groves, Shri Vrindavan Dham. Thus within my vision I will always behold the beautiful pastimes of Radha and Krishna. I beg you to make me a follower carry the aims of Raj. Please give me the privilege of devotional service and make me your own maid servant. This very fallen lowly servant Krishna praise. May I always swim in love with Shri Radha and Govind. Jai Shrimati Tulsi Maharani ki jai. Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu Shri Krishna Kam ki jai. Chaito Darpanam Mahajan Bhava Mahadava Mekha Shri Akari Vachandika Vitaranam Vidya Vadu Jeevanam Ananda Mudivardhanam Patipadam Purnamrita Sadhanam Sarvatmasnam Jayati Shri Krishna Sankirtanam Nam Namakai Baudha Nija Sarva Shakti Tatratpita Niyamita Shmane Nakala Ita Drushi Tava Kripaya Bhagavan Mamapi Durdhaiva Vidishamyajani Nanuraga Trinadapi Sunichena Tarorapi Saishnuna Amanina Manadena Kirtaniya Sadari Nadhanam Najnam Nasundari Kavitam Rajaparisha Kamaye Mama Janmare Janmanishwari Bhavata Bhakti Rahaitu Gitvaye Ainanda Tanuja Kinkaram Paritamam Visame Bhavam Buddho Kripaya Tava Pada Pankaja Sitaduli Sadesham Vichintaya Nayanam Galorashru Dharaya Vadanam Gadagadardaya Gira Ulakari Chitam Vapukada Tavanama Grahane Bhavisati Juga Itam Nimishena Chakrusha Pravusha Itam Shunya Itam Jagata Sarvam Govinda Virahe Name Asli Shabapadaраtam Pinashtumam Adarshanam Marma Hatam Karotuva Jatha Tathava Vidadhatulam Pato Marpranatastu Saivana Para Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu Shri Krishna Kam ki jai. Namo Mahavarannaya Krishna Prema Pradayati Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namine Gurati She Namaha. Glory to the Shri Krishna Sankirtana, which cleanses the heart of all the dust accumulated for years and extinguishes the fiery condition of life of repeated birth and death. This Sankirtan movement is the prime benediction for humanity at large, because it spreads the rays of the benediction moon. It is the life of all transcendental knowledge. It increases the ocean of transcendental bliss and enables us to fully taste the nectar of which we're always anxious. O my Lord, your holy name alone can render all benediction to living beings, and thus you have hundreds and millions of names like Krishna and Govinda. In these transcendental names, you have invested all your transcendental energies. There are not even hard and fast rules for chanting these names. O my Lord, out of kindness you enable us to easily approach you by holy names, but I'm so unfortunate that I have no attraction for them. Once you chant the holy name of the Lord in humble state of mind, thinking oneself lower than straw in the street. One should be more tolerant than a tree, devoid of all sense of false prestige, and should be ready to offer all respect to others. In such state of mind, one can chant the holy name of the Lord constantly. O Almighty Lord, I have no desire to accumulate wealth, nor do I desire beautiful women, nor do I want any number of followers. I only want your causeless devotion service birth after birth. O son of Maharaj Nanda Krishna, I am your eternal servitor. Yes, some or other, I have fallen in this ocean of birth and death. Please pick me up from this ocean of death and place me as one of the atoms at your lotus feet. Oh my Lord, oh will my eyes be decorated with tears of love flowing constantly when I chant your holy name? Or will my voice choke up? And will the hairs of my body stand on the end of the recitation of your name? Oh Govinda, feeling your separation, I am considering a moment to be like 12 years or more. Tears are flowing from my eyes like torrents of rain, and I'm feeling all vacant in the world in your absence. I know no one but Krishna as my Lord, and he sure remains so, even if he handles me roughly by his embrace, or makes me broken-hearted by not being present before me. He is completely free to do anything and everything, for he is always my worshipful Lord, unconditionally. Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Shri Kyastakam Ki Jai. There are 10 offenses in the matter of chanting the holy name of the Lord that should be avoided. They are as follows. 1. To blaspheme the devotees who dedicate your life for propagating the holy name of the Lord. 2. To consider names of demigods and Lord Shiva and Lord Brahma to be equal to or independent of the name Lord Vishnu. 3. To disobey the orders of the spiritual master. 4. To blaspheme the Vedic literatures or literatures and pursuits of Vedic version. 5. To consider the glories of chanting Hare Krishna to be imagination. 6. To give some interpretation to the holy name of the Lord. 7. To commit sinful activities on the strength of chanting the holy name. 8. To consider the chanting of Hare Krishna as one of the auspicious ritualistic activities which are offered in Vedas as fruitive activities, karma kanda. 9. To instruct the faithless person about the glories of holy name. And 10. To not have complete faith in chanting of the holy names, and to maintain material attachments, even after understanding so many instructions on this matter. It is also an offense to be inattentive while chanting. Every devotee who claims to be a Vaishnava must carefully guard against 10 offenses in order to quickly achieve the desired success. Krishna Prema. Now let us offer our most humble obeisances unto all the Vaishnavas, devotees of the Lord. They are just like desire trees that can fulfill the desires of everyone, and they are full of compassion for the fallen conditioned souls. Vanchakalpa tirabhischa, kripa sindhubhye cha, patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha Vaishnava Thakur ki jai. Nama Om Vishnu Pradaya Krishna Prastaya Bhuti Vishmati Bhakti Vinata Swami Tinami. Namaste Saraswati Devi Guruvani Puchakti Nirvisesa Sunyavad Paschatya Desatarni. Shri Guru Pranama prayers ki jai. Om Aganya Timirandasya Jnananjana Salakaya Chaksurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manubhistam Sapitam Yena Bhutali Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Bandeham Shri Guru Shri Jataha Pajikamalan Shri Gurun Vaishnavamsa Shri Rupam Sagrachatam Sakadna Ragunatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Saidvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahaguna Lalita Shri Vishaka Nivitam Sa Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutali Shrimate Bhakti Vedanta Swamini Tinamine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvisesa Sunyavadi Paschatya Desatarine
Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutali Srimati Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Namini Shivarsavanadbi Devi Daitaya Kripabdaye Krishna Sambandha Vigyana Dayane Prabhane Namaha Madhur Ujvala Primadya Shri Rupanuga Bhakti Da Shri Gora Karuna Shakti Vigrahaya Namastate Namaste Gurvani Shri Murtaye Dinatarine Rupanuga Virudapa Apasiddhanta Dvantaharine Namo Gora Kishoraya Shakshad Vairagya Murtaye Vipralambara Sambodhe Padambajayate Namaha Namo Bhakti Vinodaya Sachitanandanamine Gora Shakti Swarupaya Rupanugavarayate Gora Vir Bhavabhumestvam Nirdesta Sajjana Priya Vaishnava Savabhuma Sri Jaganatayate Namaha Vanchakalpa Tarabhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Namo Mahavadanyaya Krishna Prema Padayate Krishna Krishna Chaitanya Namne Gurujase Namaha Panchatattvatmakam Krishnam Bhakta Rupa Swarupakam Bhaktavataram Bhaktakyam Namami Bhakti Saktikam Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopisha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate Jayatam Suratur Pangur Mama Manda Matir Gati Matsarvaswa Padambojo Radha Madana Mohano Divyad Vindaranya Kalpadumadaha Shimad Ratnagara Simhasanastato Shimad Radha Shila Govinda Devo Prastali Bihi Sevyamano Smarami Shiman Rasa Rasaram Bivam Sivata Tatastita Karsan Venuswanir Gopir Gopinatak Striyestuna Tapta Kanchana Gurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vishvanustute Devi Pranahamani Hari Priye Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasati Gaur Bhaktivinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Shri Brahmasamhita Ki Jai Vishwara Parama Krishna Sachitananda Vigraha Anadiradir Govinda Sarvakarana Karanam Chintamani Prakarasat Masukalpa Riksha Lakshavrite Susurabhira Vipalayantam Lakshmi Sahasra Satasambhrama Sevyamanam Govindam Adi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Venam Kvanantam Aravinda Dalayataksham Parhavatam Samasitam Buddha Sundarangam Kandarpa Koti Kamaniya Vishesha Sobham Govinda Mahadi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Alola Chandra Kalasadvanamalya Vamsi Ratnam Gadam Pranayakeli Kalavilasam Shamam Dibanga Lalita Nita Prakasam Govinda Mahadi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Angani Yasya Sakalendriya Vrittimanti Pasyanti Panti Kalyanti Chiran Jaganti Ananda Chinmaya Sadujvala Vigrahasya Govinda Mahadi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Advaitam Achyutam Anadim Anantarupam Adyam Purana Purusham Navayovanam Cha Vedesu Durlabham Adurlabham Atma Bhakto Govindo Mahadi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Pantastakoti Satavatsara Sampragamyo Vayoratapi Manaso Munis Pungamanam So Pyasti Yat Prapadasim Yavichintya Tatve Govinda Mahadi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Ekopya Sora Chayatam Jagadanda Koti Yas Chakti Rasti Jagadanda Chayayadanta Andanta Rasta Paramanis Chayantarastam Govinda Mahadi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Yat Bhava Bhavita Dio Manajasta Taiva Samprapya Rupa Mahima Sanayana Bhusa Suktar Yameva Nigama Pratitaistuvanti Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Ananda Chinmaya Rasat Pratibhavita Bhista Birya Eva Nijarupa Tayakolabi Goloka Eva Nivasatak Bilatman Muto Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham tamaham bhajami premanjana churita bhakti vilochanena santak sadeva hidesu vilokayanti yam shama sundaram achintya gunaswarupam Govindam Adipurisham Tamaham Bhajami Rama Dimurti Sukala Nimenatistan Nana Avatara Makarod Bhuvane Sukintu Krishna Swayam Samabhavat Paramam Pumamyo Govindam Adipurisham Tamaham Bhajami Yasya Prabha Prabhavato Jagaranda Koti Kotiswas Eswas Subala Vibhuti Binam Tad Brahma Niskalam Anantam Anitabutam Govindam Adipurisham Tamaham Bhajami Maya Yasya Jagaranda Satani Sute Triagunya Tad Visaya Veda Vitaya Manam Sattva Vulambi Parasatvam Visuddha Sattvam Govindam Adi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Ananda Chinmaya Rasat Mataya Manasu Ya Praninam Patifulam Smaratam Upetya Leelaya Tena Bhavanani Jaya Yajasram Govindam Adi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Goloka Namni Nijadamni Tale Chatasya Devi Mahesu Aditame Satesu Tesu Tete Prabhavani Chaya Vitas Jayena Govinda Madi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Shrististati Pralaya Sadhava Saktireka Chayeva Yasya Bhuvanani Vibharti Durga Ichanu Rupam Apyasya Chachestate Sa Govinda Adi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Shiram Yata Divikara Visesa Yoga Sanjayate Nahitata Pritakasti Hetu Yasambutam Apitata Samapaiti Karya Govinda Mahadi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Departure Hita Santanam Abhyapetya Dipayate Ruta Hetu Samanu Dharma Stadrik Eva Hicha Vishnu Tayavibhati Govinda Mahadi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Akarna Narna Vajale Bhajatisma Yoga Nidramananta Jagadanta Saroma Kupa Adhara Shakti Avalambya Param Swamurtim Govinda Mahadi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Yashaika Nisvasita Kalamata Avalambya Jivanti Loma Villaja Jagadanda Nata Vishnu Mahansa Yasya Kalaviseso Govinda Mahadi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Baswanya Tasma Sakalesa Nijesa Teja Swayam Kiyat Prakatayat Apitadva Tatra Brahmaya Esika Jagananda Sarumakopa Dwande Pranamasamayesa Ganadi Raja Vignan Vihantam Alamasya Jagatrayasya Govinda Mahadi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Agnir Mahiga Ganamambu Marudisasya Kalasta Tatma Manasiti Jagatrayani Yasmad Bhavanti Vibhavanti Visanti Yamcha Govinda Mahadi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Yaschaksuresa Savita Sakalagrahanam Raja Samasta Suramurti Rasesa Teja Yasya Gaya Brahmati Sambrita Kala Chakro Govinda Mahadi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Dharmo Papa Chaya Sutasta Pamsi Brahmadi Kita Patagava Teyasta Jiva Yadata Matra Vibhava Prakata Prabhava Govinda Mahadi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Yastrinda Gopa Matavendra Mahosva Karma Bandanu Rupa Falabhajana Matanoti Karmani Nidahati Kintu Chabakti Bhajam Govinda Mahadi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Yam Kroda Kama Saja Pranayadi Bhikti Vatsalya Moha Guru Guru Vasavya Bhava Sanchintya Tasya Sadrasim Tanamapurete Govinda Mahadi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Sriyakanta Kanta Parama Purusha Kalpataravo Drumabha Mischintamani Ganama Yitoyam Amritam Kataganam Natyam Gamanam Apivam Sipriyasaki Chidanandam Jyotiparam Apitada Swadyam Apicha Sayatra Shiradi Bihishavadi Surabi Vyasta Sumahan Nimesar Dakya Vavra Jatina Hiyatrapi Samaya Bhaje Swita Dvipam Tamaham Iha Golakamitiyam Itantas Te Santakshiti Virachari Katipaye Ishwara Parama Krishna Sachitananda Vigraha and Adi Adi Govinda Sarvakarana Karanam Shri Guru Vastaka prayers Ki Jai. The spiritual master is receiving benediction from the ocean of mercy, just as the cloud pours water on the forest fire to extinguish it, so the spiritual master delivers the materially afflicted world by extinguishing the blazing fire of material existence. Out of my respectful obeisance unto the lotus feet is such a spiritual master who's an ocean of auspicious qualities, chanting the holy name, dancing in ecstasy, singing and playing musical instruments. The spiritual master is always gladdened by the Sankirtan movement of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Because he is relishing the mellows of pure devotion within his mind, sometimes his hair stands on end, he feels quivering in his body, and tears flow from his eyes like waves. I offer my respectful obeisance unto the lotus feet is such a spiritual master. The spiritual master is always engaged in the temple worship of Shri Radha and Krishna, He also engaged his disciples in such worship. They dressed the deities in beautiful clothes and ornaments, cleaned their temple, and performed other similar worship of the Lord. I offer my respectful obeisance unto the Lotus Street as such spiritual master. The spiritual master is always offering Krishna 4 kinds of delicious food, analyzes that which is licked, chewed, drunk, and sucked. When the spiritual master sees that he is satisfied by eating Bhagavat Prasada, he is satisfied. I offer my respectful obeisance unto the Lotus Street as such a spiritual master. The spiritual master is always eager to hear and chant about the unlimited conjugal pastimes of Radhika and Madhava and their qualities, names, and forms. The spiritual master aspires to relish these at every moment. I offer my respectful obeisance unto the Lotus Street as such spiritual master. The spiritual master is very dear because he is expert in assisting gopis who at different times make different tasteful arrangements for the perfection of Radha and Krishna's conjugal loving affairs within the groves of Vrindavan. I offer my most humble obeisance unto the Lotus Street as such a spiritual master. The spiritual master is to be honored as much as the Supreme Lord because he is the most confidential servant to the Lord. This is acknowledged in all revealed scriptures and followed by all authorities. Therefore, I offer my respectful obeisance unto the Lotus Street as such a spiritual master who is a bona fide representative of Sri Hare Krishna. By the mercy of the spiritual master, one receives the benediction of Krishna. Without the grace of the spiritual master, one cannot make any advancement. Therefore, I should always remember and praise the spiritual master at least 3 times a day. I should offer my respectful obeisance unto the Lotus Street of my spiritual master, his divine grace. A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Srimad Bhagavatam Grantha Ki Jai. Canto 3, Chapter 1, Text number 9. Yada Chaparta Prahita Sabayam Jagat Guru Yani Jagada Krishna Natani Pumsam Amritayanani Rajo Rumene Shatapunyalesa. Yada, when, cha, also, Partha Prahita, being advised by Arjuna, Sabayam, in the assembly, Jagat Guru, of the teacher of the world, Yani, those, Jagada, went, Krishna, Lord Krishna, na, never, tani, such words, pumsam, of all men of sense, amrita ayanani, as good as nectar, Raja, the king, Dhritarashtra or Duryodhana, Uru, very important, many, did consider, sata, dwindling, punyalesa, fragment of pious acts. Translation by Srila Prabhupada. Lord Krishna was sent by Arjuna into the assembly as the spiritual master of the whole world. And although his words were heard by some, like Bhisma, as pure nectar, it was not so for the others, who were completely bereft of the last farthing of past pious works. The king, Dhritarashtra or Duryodhana, did not take the words of Lord Krishna very seriously. Purport by his divine grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Lord Krishna, who is the spiritual master of the entire universe, accepted the duty of a messenger and deputed by Arjuna, went to the assembly of King Dhritarashtra on a peace mission. Krishna is everyone's Lord, yet because he was the transcendental friend of Arjuna, he gladly accepted the role of messenger, exactly like an ordinary friend. That is the beauty of the Lord's behavior with his pure devotees. He reached the assembly and spoke about peace, and the message was relished by Bhisma and other great leaders because it was spoken by the Lord himself. But due to the exhaustion of the pious results of their past deeds, Duryodhana, or his father, Dhritarashtra, did not take the message very seriously. That is the way of persons who have no credit of pious deeds. By past pious deeds, one may become the king of a country, but because the results of the pious acts of Duryodhana and company were dwindling, it became evident from their actions that they were sure to lose the kingdom to the Pandavas. The message of Godhead is always like nectar to the devotees, but it is just the opposite. But it is It is just the opposite to the non-devotees. Sugar candy is always sweet to a healthy man, but it tastes very bitter to persons suffering from jaundice. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Lord Krishna was sent by Arjuna into the assembly as the spiritual master of the whole world, and although his words were heard by some like Bhisma as pure nectar, it was not so for the others, who were completely bereft of the last farthing of past pious works. The king, Dhritarashtra Duryodhana, did not take the words of Lord Krishna very seriously. So there's a very important point made in this purport, that is, when one's past pious deeds becomes dwindling, that means that the effect of those pious deeds begins to go away. They're used up already, because there can be a finite thing. So this is also explained in the Bhagavad Gita, 9th chapter, and verse number 20 and 21. Trividyamam soma paputa papa yajner istva swargatim partayante te punyam asadya surendra lokam asanti divyan divideva bogan. Those who study the Vedas and drink the soma juice, seeking the heavenly planets, worship me indirectly. Purified of sinful reactions, they take birth on the pious heavenly planet of Indra, where they enjoy godly delights. Okay, so in the purport, Prabhupada says the word Trividya refers to the three Vedas, Sama, Yajur, and Rig. A Brahmana who has studied these three Vedas is called a Trivedi. Anyone who is very much attached to knowledge derived from these three Vedas is respected in society. Unfortunately, there are many great scholars of the Vedas who do not know the ultimate purport of studying them. Therefore, Krishna herein declares himself to be the ultimate goal for the Trivedis. Actual Trivedis take shelter under the lotus feet of Krishna and engage in pure devotional service to satisfy the Lord. Devotional service begins with the chanting of the Hare Krishna mantra, and side by side trying to understand Krishna in truth. Unfortunately, those who are simply official students of the Vedas become more interested in offering sacrifices to the different demigods like Indra and Chandra. By such endeavor, the worshippers of different demigods are certainly purified of the contamination of lower qualities of nature, and are thereby elevated to the higher planetary systems or heavenly planets known as Maharloka, Janaloka, and Tapaloka, etc. Once situated in those higher planetary systems, one can satisfy his senses hundreds of thousands of times better than on this planet. Then, text 21. Titam bhukva swargalokam vasalam shine punye martyalokam vishanti evam trayi dharmam anuprapana gata gatam kama kama labante. When they have thus enjoyed vast heavenly sense pleasure, and the results of their pious activities are exhausted, that's the point right there. The result of their pious activities are exhausted. So that's what's being said here also. The reason why Dhritarashtra and Duryodhana were not so interested in the message of peace of Krishna, whereas Bhisma, Pitamaha, and other great leaders were enraptured by it. They were very pleased to hear it. Right? It's because Dhritarashtra and Duryodhana had exhausted, or the effect of their pious activities were nearly at an end, or they were dwindling. It became, so Duryodhana and company, the pious acts of Duryodhana and company were dwindling. It became evident from their actions that they were sure to lose the kingdom of the Pandavas. The message of God is always like nectar to the devotees, but it is just the opposite to the non-devotees. Sugar candy is always sweet to a healthy man, but it tastes very bitter to persons suffering from jaundice. So this is the point of what happens when people become envious of someone else or jealous. I mean, enviousness is, jealousy is someone has something you don't have, they want it. If they get it, their jealousy sort of subsides. But enviousness means that someone has something that a person wants, and even if the person gets the same thing, they're still not satisfied until that person who has something is destroyed. So that was the example of Ravana. He had so many wives, but yet he was not satisfied. He wanted to take Sita away from Rama. And he wanted Rama to have nothing. And he thought he succeeded because Rama was banished from the kingdom. He didn't have a treasury. He didn't have an army. And now he didn't have his wife, right? Because Ravana stole her. So he thought, well, the only reason he was so powerful is because his wife was very beautiful. But I'll get more powerful than him by taking his wife away from him. So you see, this is envy. They're not satisfied until the other person is destroyed. So then, in this purport, it says, when they, meaning the people who have performed pious activities, worshipping the demigods, so forth, have thus enjoyed vast heavenly sense pleasure, and the results of their pious activities are exhausted, they return to this mortal planet again. Thus, those who seek sense enjoyment by adhering to the principles of the three Vedas achieve only repeated birth and death. So in the purport, Prabhupada says, one who is promoted to the higher planetary systems enjoys a longer duration of life and better facilities for sense enjoyment. Yet, one is not allowed to stay there forever. One is again sent back to the earth upon finishing the resultant fruits of pious activities. So, in this case, Duryodhana, Dhritarashtra, they were enjoying being the heads of state of this gigantic kingdom that included the whole world at that time. But now the effect of their so-called pious activities was dwindling. And you could tell it because they were beginning to make big mistakes, such as ignoring or not being interested in what Krishna was telling them. Therefore, it was sure that they were going to lose everything they had. So it says, one is again sent back to this earth upon finishing the resultant fruits of pious activities. He who has not attained perfection of knowledge, as indicated in the Vedanta Sutra, Janmadasya Yata, or in other words, he who fails to understand Krishna, the cause of all causes, becomes baffled about achieving the ultimate goal of life, and is thus subjected to the routine of being promoted to the higher planets and then again coming down as if situated on a Ferris wheel, which sometimes goes up and sometimes comes down. The purport is that instead of being elevated to the spiritual world from which there is no longer any possibility of coming down, one simply revolves in the cycle of birth and death and higher and lower planetary systems. One should better take to the spiritual world to enjoy an eternal life full of bliss and knowledge, and never return to this miserable material existence. Well, that's a very profound statement, and it corroborates what is being said in this purport. The message of Godhead is always like nectar to the devotees, but it is just the opposite to the non-devotees. Sugar candy is always sweet to a healthy man, but it tastes very bitter to persons suffering from jaundice. So, what was the cause of this? Well, although a person performs pious activity, and although they get very positive results, such as being elevated to the higher planetary level, like Indra Loka, or going even further, Mahaloka, Jnana Loka. But however, eventually the positive results, the effects of them dwindle, are diminished. And now, when it's finished, they have to come back down again to the Martya Loka, the middle planets or lower planets, where there's birth, death, old age, and disease. Even on the higher planets in the material world, there's birth, death, old age, and disease. So what's the cause of this? Well, here it says that one who fails to understand Krishna, the cause of all causes, becomes baffled about achieving the ultimate goal of life. And Prabhupada talks about this in another place in dialectic spiritualism, in the when he's talking about Darwin, and Prabhupada says, Hayagriva Das asked a question. First, Prabhupada says, yes, we can actually see that the human race has become degraded. So Hayagriva Das asks, what is the cause of this? Why is human race degrading? Right? And we see that today. And Prabhupada's answer is improper education. Improper education. Every individual person is a soul, and each has a particular type of body. The human body in particular requires education. The soul evolves through various species according to his desires, his or her desires. Material nature supplies the bodies, acting under the orders of God. God exists within the core of everyone's heart, and when the individual soul desires something, material nature, following the orders of God, gives him a machine in the form of a body. When we attain the human form, we can either regress, in other words, go back to the animal form, or make spiritual progress. Animals also have desires, but they change bodies and species according to the laws of nature. The human body, in particular, is meant for understanding God, acting accordingly, and returning home back to Godhead. If we do not realize this opportunity, we regress to lower species. So it's a question of education. And that education is what we're doing now. We're hearing Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam. But if people avoid that and get sidetracked into thinking that the purpose of life is sense gratification, then they basically waste their time on this earth and do not actually achieve the purpose of human birth. Therefore, they don't need to have a human body. They can go back to being animals or insects or birds or aquatics or whatever. Now, yesterday we discussed about the Ambani family. It was very interesting. And the father was lamenting, and then he called the devotee, and he was telling him. Well, what did the devotee tell him? What did the devotee tell the father? Do we know?
I mean, at that time he was still young, so he just told, it seems, I'm just sharing with you. I don't think I can do anything. So I don't know if he gave any advice back. That wasn't discussed in that call.
Okay. Well, see, that's the problem. He might not have known what to say because, he doesn't want to say the wrong thing while the richest man in India is lamenting and maybe ruin his relationship with him, But see, that's not the case of Vidura. Vidura spoke very firmly with Dhritarashtra, and we're going to hear that in a few minutes. And Dhritarashtra just like when Krishna came, he didn't speak harshly. He spoke very kindly, talking about peace, right? And they weren't interested. Dhritarashtra and Duryodhana were not interested because they didn't have the benefit any longer of pious activities. They had wasted it by enjoying kingdom and a kingdom that they stole, they usurped, that doesn't belong to them. So we see how devotees at times can be in situations where they can maybe give good advice to very prominent people, but if they don't give the advice, because they're taking a risk, right? What if the person doesn't like what they hear? Then they'll lose their relationship with that person. But see, Vidura did not back down. He gave the right, and we're going to hear it now, he gave the right advice to Dhritarashtra, and Krishna also gave the right advice to Dhritarashtra. Dhritarashtra was not able to accept it because he didn't have enough pious effects of pious activities. And because they were enjoying the kingdom rather than managing it and then giving it back to the Pandavas. So therefore, they were destined to be defeated. Even though they had a superior army, they had many more soldiers on their side, but they were destined to lose it. Now, what should have been explained to Mr. Ambani was that, why do you need to make any more money? You already are the richest guy in India. You already have vast businesses and everything, but you're lamenting that you didn't spend enough time with your younger son. You might have spent more time with your older son, and he is obedient to you, right? To continue to work very hard in the family business and make more money, and also be somewhat spiritually inclined. However, because Mr. Ambani was so busy making money, he didn't have the time to spend. That's what he said. He didn't have the time to spend with his younger son. So why doesn't he spend that time now? Why does he have to be always making more and more money? He already is the richest guy, right? So the advice to him should have been that, look, you have to become more serious because you're not fixed up enough to convince your son of anything at this point, right? You're too involved in your business, and now you're lamenting because your second son is not being obedient. So now you have to become more spiritually fixed up, and then you'll be in a position to advise your son gently, not harshly, to become more obedient and more serious about spiritual life. And you should concentrate on your whole family to make them much more spiritually inclined rather than money inclined. But the devotee probably didn't give that advice. And so what happens when that situation, so someone who has some spiritual inclination, but who is so rich that they just can't break their attachment to making money. So this is explained by Prabhupada. Yasyaham anagrinami harishitadanam sanai. It's the 10th canto, 88th chapter, 8th verse. And it says, basically, it's a lot of difference. As it is said, Yasyaham anagrinanti harishitadanam sanai. It is by the mercy of the Lord that one gets all material opulence. But if such material opulence causes one to become puffed up and forget the process of self-realization, the Lord certainly takes all the opulence away. There it is. That's what that verse means. Or again, by material opulence, but material opulence. So this was a statement. The first thing I read was a statement. Srimad Bhagavatam, 8th canto, 22nd chapter, 16th verse in the purport. Then, in the, again, 8th, Srimad Bhagavatam, 8th canto, 22nd chapter, 16th verse, Prabhupada says, but material opulence is sometimes dangerous because it diverts one's attention to false prestige by giving one the impression that he is the owner and master of everything he surveys, although actually this is not the fact. Well, that's what happened to Duryodhana and Dhritarashtra. They wanted to usurp or take away the kingdom of the Pandavas, and they wanted to be the rulers of that kingdom. So that was an illicit, sinful desire. They were only supposed to, Dhritarashtra was only supposed to be a caretaker until the Pandavas became adults. And then he was supposed to hand it over back to them. But he wanted his sons to be in charge. Okay, so that is one's attention diverts one's, because material opulence, while they were enjoying material opulence as king or kings of the entire world. But material opulence is sometimes dangerous because it diverts one's attention to false prestige by giving one the impression that he is the owner and master of everything he surveys. Although, actually, this is not the fact. To protect the devotee from such a misunderstanding, the Lord, showing special mercy, sometimes takes away his material possessions. Yasyaham anugrinami harishita danam sanai. Then again, in a lecture in Srimad Bhagavatam, 1st Canto, 2nd chapter, 6th verse, in Calcutta on February 26, 1974, Prabhupada says, so sometimes Krishna shows the mercy to turn his devotee into poverty-stricken position. Yasyaham anugrinami harishe tadanam sanai. Srimad Bhagavatam 1088.8. Therefore, somebody is afraid of coming to Krishna. Yeah, people who know a little bit of the Shastra and this verse, and then they say, oh my God, I better not be Krishna conscious because he's going to take everything away from me. Well, no, he doesn't take everything away from you if you're using it properly. But if you get puffed up and think you own everything and you're independent, if that false ego takes over your life, then because you've done service previously, Krishna says, well, look, I'm going to help this person come back seriously to Krishna consciousness. I'm going to take away all his wealth. So therefore he says, therefore somebody is afraid of coming to Krishna. But Krishna is also very kind. When you become actually a devotee, Yogashemam Vaham Yaham. So he's quoting 9th chapter, Bhagavad Gita, 22nd verse, where one is no longer disturbed by yoga and shema, gain and safety. One is completely dependent on Krishna. So then he says, when you become actually a devotee, Yogashema Vahamyaham, Bhagavad Gita 9:22, there will be no scarcity. Whatever you want, it will come. It will come. So this is the position. So in other words, it's basically he's saying something that also is in the first chapter of Bhagavad Gita, 32nd to 35th verse, where Krishna says to Arjuna, says, O Govinda, of what avail to us are a kingdom, happiness, or even life itself, when all those for whom we may desire them are now arrayed on this battlefield? O Madhusudana, when teachers, fathers, sons, grandfathers, maternal uncles, fathers-in-law, grandsons, brothers-in-law, and other relatives are ready to give up their lives and properties and are standing before me, why should I wish to kill them, even though they might otherwise kill me? O maintainer of all living entities, I am not prepared to fight with them, even in exchange for the 3 worlds, let alone this earth. What pleasure will we derive from killing the sons of Dhritarashtra? So that sounds like it's a very noble statement. But let's hear what Prabhupada says in the purport. He says, Arjuna has addressed Lord Krishna as Govinda because Krishna is the object of all pleasures for cows and the senses. By using this significant word, Arjuna indicates that Krishna should understand what will satisfy Arjuna's senses. But Govinda is not meant for satisfying our senses. If we try to satisfy the senses of Govinda, however, then automatically our own senses are satisfied. Materially, everyone wants to satisfy his senses, and he wants God to be the order supplier for such satisfaction. The Lord will satisfy the senses of living entities as much as they deserve, but not to the extent that they may covet or desire. So basically, when it says up to what they deserve, that means according to their previous karma. Not one iota more, or not one farthing, or not one penny more, and not one penny less. No matter how many pujas you do, right? So here it says, the Lord will satisfy the senses of living entities as much as they deserve, but not to the extent that they may covet. Covet means desire. But when one takes the opposite way, namely, when one tries to satisfy the senses of Govinda without desiring to satisfy one's own senses, then by the grace of Govinda, all desires of the living entity are satisfied. So all desires, that means that all the spiritual desires will be satisfied. Just like Prabhupada wanted to write and print many books, right, to please his guru. And he wanted to spread this movement all over the world. And he wanted to offer temples that would be like colleges of education, of a real education for devotees. And he wanted to preserve also the holy places of the Vaishnavas. And so many things that he wanted. All those things were accomplished. Every one of those desires was accomplished. Right? Why? But when one takes the opposite way, namely, when one tries to satisfy the senses of Govinda without desiring to satisfy one's own senses, then by the grace of Govinda, all desires of the living entity are satisfied. This is the secret, but it's an open secret. But not many people are interested in hearing this. You say, they're too busy making money. Arjuna's deep affection for community and family members is exhibited here partly due to his natural compassion for them. He is therefore not prepared to fight. Everyone wants to show his opulence to friends and relatives, but Arjuna fears that all his relatives and friends will be killed on the battlefield, and he will be unable to share his opulence after victory. This is a typical calculation of material life. In other words, Arjuna is materially afflicted here and conflicted also, right? Therefore, he can't follow Krishna's order because of family attachment, extended family attachment. The transcendental life, however, is different. Since a devotee wants to satisfy the desires of the Lord, he can, Lord willing, accept all kinds of opulence for the service of the Lord. And if the Lord is not willing, he should not accept a farthing. Arjuna did not want to kill his relatives, and if there were any need to kill them, he desired that Krishna kill them personally. At this point, he told. This fact is disclosed in following chapters. As a natural devotee of the Lord, Arjuna did not like to retaliate against his miscreant cousins and brothers, but it was the Lord's plan that they should all be killed. The devotee of the Lord does not retaliate against the wrongdoer, but the Lord does not tolerate any mischief done to the devotee by the miscreants. The Lord can excuse a person on his own account, but he excuses no one who has done harm to the devotees. Therefore, the Lord was determined to kill the miscreants, although Arjuna wanted to excuse them. So now, we should think about this very seriously and not force Krishna to take everything away from us, right? Although that's his mercy. Now let's hear what Prabhupada says about that. It's very interesting. He says, lecture on Srimad Bhagavatam, 1st Canto, 13th chapter, 11th verse, in Geneva, June 2nd, 1974. So there is a version by Krishna that one who is anxious to take Krishna consciousness, but he is entrapped by this binding, nice wife, nice children, nice home, nice bank balance. So Krishna, in order to give such devotee facility, he takes away. Harishita danam sanai. Yasyaham anugrinami harishita danam sanai. Srimad Bhagavatam 1088.8. Just like he did with the Pandavas. The Pandavas were devotees, but at the same time they were king. There was attachment. So therefore Krishna took away their everything, their kingdom, their wife, their position, their honor, and tested them. And still they did not give up Krishna. Therefore they came out victorious. So Krishna sometimes tests his devotees, that how much one devotee is dedicated to him. He forcibly makes him renounced in order to test. That is Krishna's special favor. Okay. So that's not all. There's more. Where Prabhupada says, on the occasion of His Divine Grace Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Goswami Prabhupada's Disappearance Day lecture in Los Angeles, December 13th, 1973, Prabhupada says, so in this way, gradually, I became attached to these Gaudiya Mata activities. And by the grace of Krishna, my business was also not going very well. He said, by the grace of Krishna, my business was not going very well. And he laughs. Yes, Krishna says, Yasyaham anugrinami harisita danam sanai. If somebody wants to be actually devotee of Krishna, at the same time keeps his material attachments, then Krishna's business is that he takes away everything material, so that 100% the devotee becomes, dependent on Krishna. So that actually happened to my life. Okay. Now, also, there is a video. Let's see if I can find it real quick. One second. Okay, Pradyumna Prabhu sent me this. Let's see, I hope you can hear it.
I did not like my wife. Somehow or other I did not like. I must say she's very faithful, very everything, everyone, but I did not like somehow or other. So I was preparing for next marriage. Because in India, at that time it was allowed. A man can marry more than one wife. Now the law is there. So my father, he was a saintly person. See, he called me one day and said, my dear boy, you are trying to marry again. I request you, don't do that. you do not like your wife, that is a great fortune for you.
Great fortune.
So I gave up that idea, marrying. Yes. So now I am realizing my father's blessing. Yes. That if I would have been too much attached to my wife, then I could not have come to this position. That's a fact. So, by ethical point of view, from spiritual point of view, to become too much attached to wife is an impediment for spiritual advance.
There it is. But in another place, he specifically talks about one second, let me see where that is. Again, lecture in Srimad Bhagavatam 1.16.23 in Hawaii, January 19, 1974. He says, this question was asked by Yudhisthira Maharaj. Parikshit Maharaj to Sukadev Goswami. Yasyaham anagrinami harishita danam sanai. Because here in this material world, the more we possess material wealth, it is our bondage. Aham mameti. The hamameti is the false ego, I, me, and mine. So this is a problem with the Ambani family. There's so much material wealth, and therefore it stops them from actually making tangible spiritual progress, because they become attached to the power, the prestige, and also they may even believe that they are independent. And then Prabhupada says, by worshipping the beggar, this is a lecture on Srimad Bhagavatam, 5th canto, 5th chapter, 2nd verse, in Hyderabad, April 13th, 1975. By worship, this is a proverb. Prabhupada says, by worshipping the beggar, one becomes rich. And by worshipping the rich, one becomes beggar. What is this contradiction? So this is answered by Krishna. Yasyaham anagrinami harishita danam sanai. My first benediction to my devotee is that I take away all his riches. That's all. Then, when he becomes helpless, he becomes firmly convinced and he has no other shelter. Then automatically he takes shelter of Krishna. What Krishna demands? Sarva dharmam parityaja. Mamekam saranam braja. One should surrender unto him. So, therefore it says, by worshipping the rich, one becomes a beggar. So, if one is always striving to become richer and richer and richer and richer and richer and richer, then they become poorer spiritually. And that causes problems. But on the other hand, it says, by worshipping the beggar, one becomes rich. If one understands the history of Sandipani Muni, not Sandipani Muni, what's the name of the person that went to see Krishna in Dwarka? What? Sudama, yeah. Sudama Brahmana. He was poor, right? So he went as a poor man to Krishna, and he was embarrassed to ask him. So he didn't ask him anything, right? But Krishna knew exactly why he was coming, and he snatched a little bit of chipped rice that he had and started eating it. It wasn't even cooked. And then his wife stopped him. It took away the rice from Krishna, so he wouldn't eat any more of it. But when Siddhama Vipra went back home, he saw that his wife was now rejuvenated into a beautiful young lady, and his whole village, everybody had beautiful palaces. And so, therefore, if you, as it says here, by worshiping the beggar, one becomes rich, and by worshiping the rich, one becomes a beggar. So, we should understand that there's nothing wrong with becoming rich if you use that wealth in the service of Krishna, and do not get puffed up by it, and do not develop the aham mameti. Everything is I, me, and mine. Right? There's a saying in English, what is mine, and what is yours is mine. So that type of consciousness is very bad, and therefore and then so in a lecture in Srimad Bhagavatam 7.9.10 and 11 in Montreal, July 14, 1968, Prabhupada says, so the question may be that because everything has to be offered to Krishna, so does it mean that Krishna is hankering after my riches? Because I have amassed so much money by hard labor, and Krishna is very clever that he's trying to take it away? Yes, Prabhupada laughs. Yes, that is the fact. Krishna says in the Bhagavata that Yasyaham anigrinami harisitadhanam sanai. The Pandavas, they were friends of Krishna, and they were put into so many difficulties. Their kingdom was stolen. Their wife was insulted. They were forced to live in the forest, giving up the kingdom. So many difficulties. Their house was set on fire. The other party, his cousin brothers, by his cousin brothers. Okay, so all these things happen. But yet, once when Narada Muni met Krishna, he said, Krishna, there's something I don't understand. You are the personal guru, you're the personal protector of the Pandavas, but they lost their kingdom. Their wife was insulted. They were put into exile. They had a palace that was set on fire to kill them. So how do you explain this? So Krishna smiled, and Narada Muni was like challenging him, right? And but he only smiled. He didn't say anything. And then Narada Muni said, yes, that's what I said is a fact. But yet, what happened was, the more they suffered, the more they depended on you. And then Krishna smiled more. Because, you see, the Pandavas, being genuine devotees, they did not waver in their determination to serve Krishna and to be dedicated to serving the Lord. So, therefore, by losing everything, they became more attached to Krishna. But there are people that, when they lose things, they reject Krishna. So therefore, this is the test to see who is actually a devotee and who is not a devotee. Okay. So, what time is it now? Okay. Well, we'll stop right there. Are there any questions? There's a whole lecture Prabhupada gives where he explains how his business was failing. I'll find it tomorrow. We'll hear it. His business is failing, and he's really very disturbed by it. But then his guru is asking him to take. His guru is coming to him in his dreams, telling him to take sannyas, and he's horrified by that. So he explains all that. And then we'll hear that tomorrow. Any questions?
It looks like the final success of life is to become pure devotee of the Lord. So that's what Krishna is trying to arrange.
Yes. Yes.
Whether it is taking away the wealth, if we are not aligned to that.
No, but look, Prahlad Maharaj was extremely wealthy. He was king of the entire universe, right? Swayambhu Vamana, extremely wealthy. And Parikshit Maharaj, extremely wealthy. Yudhisthira, extremely wealthy. But they used their wealth in Krishna's service. And they didn't get puffed up. They were very humble. And they never... and Lord Chaitanya, he was actually poor, right? He while he was married, he was very poor. At 24, he decided to take sannyas, and left his old mother and his young wife. His wife was only like 15 or 16 at the time, and he didn't have a lot of money because he was a teacher, right? But he, by preaching, he developed this huge movement where, and on the spur of the moment, he could augur up 100,000 people come immediately and performs Harinam Sankirtan when Chandkazi was trying to stop the Sankirtan movement. So we see there's nothing wrong with using wealth in the service of the Lord, because that means you recognize that Krishna is the proprietor of everything. Bhuktaram Yagatapasam Sarvaloka Maheshwaram. He's the Maheshwara. He owns everything. So the Ambani family has gone through all these problems because the father was not able to understand what is the position. Well, he understood that he was very fortunate in life, but he didn't understand that he should completely dedicate his life to serving the Lord and not be so hell-bent on making more and more money and teaching his sons to take over the whole business and continue making more money. But if you use the money in Krishna's service, there's no fault. Okay, Haribol, all goes to Prabhupada. Yeah.
So ideally the younger son should become a devotee now.
Well, he lost everything. He lost everything, right? Yeah. But did he become a devotee?
No, that's his ideal path now.
It is?
No, I'm saying that that's what
It should be, yeah.
should be.
Yeah.
You had mentioned Vidur was not afraid.
Yes. We're going to hear that. That's the next couple verses.
He was not afraid to give the right advice. So how a neophyte should not be afraid talking to some person like Ambani and not afraid about losing the relationship.
All right, we'll talk about it tomorrow. That's going to come tomorrow. Haribol. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Get these ready now. Mr. Charan, Haribol.
Shri Guru Charana Padma Kevala Bhakati Sadma
Shri Guru Charana Padma Kevala Bhakati Sadma
Vando Mui Sava Dana Mate
Mandomui Sabadana Mate
Jahara prasadeva eva bhattoriya jai.
Janara prasadevai he bhavatoriya jai.
Krishna prapti hoy jai.
Krishna prapti hoya hoyte.
Guru mukha padma vaikya dete koriya aikya.
Guru mukha padma vaikya chitte koriya kya.
Arana kari ho mane asha.
Arana koriya mane asa.
Shri Guru charane rati aise utama gati.
Shri Guru charane rati aise utama gati.
Ye prasade pure sarva sha.
Ye prasade pure sarvasa.
Chakshudan dilo jai janme janme prabhu sai.
Chakshudana dila jai janme janme prabhu se.
Divignan hriday prakasito.
Divya Jnanidhi prakasito.
Prema bhakti jaha hoite avidya vinasha jate.
Prema bhakti jaite avidya vinasajate.
Vede jai jahara charito. Shri Guru Karuna Sindhu Adama Janara Bandhu.
Guru Karuna Sindhu Adana Janara Bandhu.
Lokenath Lokera Jivana.
Yaskasakchi Bhuvana.
Ha Prabhu Koro Doya Deha More Pada Chaya.
Prabhu Kora Doya Deya More Pada Jaya.
Evija Shri Bhuvana.
Devaskasakchi Bhuvana.
Jai Prabhupada Patita Pavana.
Prabhupada Patita Pavana.
Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada.
Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada.
Namah Vishnupadaya Krishna Vrishaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine.
Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Vrishaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine.
Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavad Vadi Pasyatya Dishatarine
Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvisesa Sunyavadi Pasyatya Desatarine
Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhaktavrinda
Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaur Bhaktavrinda
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare
Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada
Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada
Jaya Guru Deva Jaya Guru Deva Jaya Guru Deva Jaya Guru Deva
Jaya Guru Deva Jaya Guru Deva Guru Deva Jaya Guru Deva
Nitai Gaura Haribo Haribo Nitai Gaura Haribo
Jai Guru Haribo 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 Nitai Guru Haribo Jai Om Vishnu Pahad Paramahansa Parvajika Chasta Tarasatara Shishi Shimani's Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Goswami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Anatkuti Vaishnavini Ki Jai Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai Prem Sikaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaitacharya Shri Radha Krishna Gopinath Sam Kunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhana Ki Jai, Shri Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai, Shri Mayapura Dham Ki Jai, Jagannath Puri Dham Ki Jai, Tulasi Devi Ki Jai, Bhakti Devi Ki Jai, Ganga Maya Ki Jai, Jamuna Maya Ki Jai, Samaveda Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai, Nitai Gaura Premanandi. All glories to assembled devotees. All glories to assembled devotees. All glories to assembled devotees. All glories to Shri Guru and Shri Guranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Patita Pavani Ki Jai. Gaur Premanandi. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Vishnu The lotus feet of our spiritual master are the only way by which we can attain the pure devotional service. I bow down to his lotus feet with great awe and reverence. By his grace one can cross the ocean of material suffering and obtain the mercy of Krishna. My only wish is to have my consciousness purified by the words emanating from his lotus mouth. Attachment to his lotus feet, he opens my darkened eyes and fills my heart with transcendental knowledge. He is my Lord, birth after birth. From him ecstatic prema emanates, by him ignorance is destroyed. The Vedic scriptures sing of his character. Our spiritual master is the ocean of mercy, the friend of the poor, and the Lord and master of devotees. O Master, be merciful unto us. Give us the shade of your lotus feet. Your fame is spread throughout all the three worlds. We take shelter of your lotus feet. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Namaste Saraswati Devi Guru Vishesha Sunyavadi Bhaskara. So, in the prayers of Tulsi Devi, it says, Ye tumara sharana holoy, taravancha purna hoy. Whoever takes shelter of you, Tulsi Devi, has his wishes fulfilled. Bestowing your mercy on him, you make him a resident of Vrindavan. So if we have only pure desires to please Krishna, all those desires will be fulfilled. Haribol.